My name is Jefferson Ighalo, is over there. And presently I work as Director of Developer Relations at a company called Monax Labs. It's a very interesting company, and how I got over there and the work we do is another topic for today. But what I'm going to be discussing with you today is how to do exactly this here, which is how to transition from being a developer to being a developer relations expert. And essentially, how to ensure that as an individual that is in the tech space, you find your voice in the workspace. The very first thing that must be understood with developer relations, right, and how this ensures that as an individual, you find your voice, is that it must first be understood that developer relations essentially begins with you as an individual. The beginning of what you do as a developer yourself and how you bring some publicity to it is exactly what developer relations is about. So once you internalize the fact that as an individual in the tech space, and as a developer or a PM or a designer, you bring a visibility to your work and ensuring that there's an entire arc for using the product and seeing that through to the end, right? Once you internalize all of that, you understand yourself how developer relations happens. So let's start from the top, right? What is developer relations? Developer relations fosters a relationship between an organization, its set of developers, right? An organization is the developers that are within the organization and then the developers consuming the services of the organization. Now, my company, right, does a bit of exciting work in the Web3 space. And really what I do in my role as Director for Developer Relations is essentially be at the space of looking at how we can bring a natural progression of a relationship between the organization itself, right, what we do, our services, and then the external body around us, right, of developers. All of that good stuff is what developer relations really is about. Then creating a vehicle of trust, right? Because in developer relations, what is understood as trust is essentially just a vehicle for marketing. Understanding that this happens, that marketing must happen for developers, but it must be done well, is the core ethos of developer relations. Now, at the very last part of this first paragraph here, I speak about how it is that is the developer, the organization, developers that are inside and developers that are outside. So how they consume, developers that consume our products via APIs and SDKs. Now, but also for you as an individual that is starting out your route in this developer relations space, developer relations can also be internal. And what this just refers to is, developer relations within the company. So ensuring that the company itself and the developers inside are excited about the product. This is very, very fundamental. This is very, very important, right? And I think this is the beginnings of your developer to developer relations arc, right? Let's move on. This is part of what I was speaking about, right? The developer relations engineer and the expert, the idea really is that you want to go on to create a trust vehicle. I speak about this a lot with my company and the people that work under me in developer advocacy and developer engineering, right? The idea behind what we do as a company is to bring about trust. So marketing must happen, but it must be experiential and experimental-based marketing. The way that this happens, rather, is that the trust in the company's product and the fact that it will deliver and it will sustain the development cycle of the product is what developer relations is interested in. Now, how can this trust be created and be fostered? It's very simple. Through things like content pieces, through thought leadership pieces, right? Through a robust documentation service and a whole system for taking feedback from external devs and bringing it back into the company. This helps when the company is trying to design an entire new system. Now, before I came into my company, where I presently work now as a developer relations expert, I worked at a company that a lot of people have interacted with, Remita Nigeria, right? And if you know Remita is just a company that aggregates payments across the entire country and brings it into the government coffers, right? Listen, understanding how it is that a company moves from A company like that, right, had been in existence for like upwards of 30 years, thereabouts. And it was from that company that I had gone on to start my career as a developer relations engineer, right? It's from that company. I'm going to tell you guys shortly a little bit about the story. Next step to understanding this now of the ideas behind developer relations is that developer relations as an entity, right, must be able to be, what's the word for it now, a capsule. At the time when I worked at this company, you know, okay, so while I was at Remita, right, I worked as a senior infrastructure front-end engineer. What that meant was that if you had ever used Remita to pay for your service, to pay for services in your company, or you had ever used it to do anything important, right, the entire front-end interface that was used to put in card information and all of that good stuff, I was the one that was in charge of that whole experience. So the idea there was that we had a product that was used. It wasn't very well loved, but it was used. Hey, you can't hold me to it being loved, but it was usable. But the idea there was that at the point in time, since I was so front-facing and so consumer-facing as the case might be, I realized one thing, that there was only going to be a guaranteed change in what this company did as a product and as an offering if someone takes in developer relations and holds it fast, even though there was no office for it at the time. So what I did at that time of my career was to say, okay, listen, we have a 30-year-old code base that was very poorly documented. Who here writes Java? Please don't write Java. But who here writes Java, please? You write Java. Hi. So this was Java 2. It was all the way from Java 8, right? It was an incredibly old code base. A little, you know how it is now, commenting gets out of hand, it gets bloated, all of that good stuff. So what I did at the time was tell my company that, listen, we need to get a refurbished developer experience. Remember at the time, I was only just a front-end engineer. Okay, so what I did at that time, yes, was to say, okay, listen, first of all, we have devs that are consuming our products, but do we have the right documentation for them? Yes, the idea to it from an executive director at the time was yes, but it was a yes that was very wonky because our documentation website at the time was so old that nobody even remembered the language it was even written in. If I remember correctly at the time, it was written in handlebars, I think. Handlebars or something pretty obscure like that, or mustache or something. Essentially, what we ended up doing at the time was going on to refurbish the entire experience from the ground up. But I'm going to tell you how this happened over the course of this presentation. Now, DevRel is a gap that needs to be filled with more technical-minded people to have a common thread and problems with the developers that are integrating. Now, this is very important, right? And of course, this is not me trying to gatekeep. It is a case of this. If, as an individual, I am trying to speak to you, and I share a common understanding of what happens with a certain product, and I understand your problems, and maybe you're having an error that should happen, but it's not really happening. In fact, your errors are happening, but they're not really exactly what the documentation says. That's the problem right there. But if I do not even have the technical expertise to know what endpoint to hit to get the right request or get the right response, then we're not going to be able to get to anywhere together. That is what happens with marketing, essentially. Marketing is just everything goes to the users. But for developer relations, right, the capsule of trust has to be created, and how that comes about is by me knowing what I'm talking about. Okay, so listen now. Now the question now is that you are a developer, or maybe you're not really a developer. You are technical minded, right? You have the right expertise. You are good enough at what you do to be able to speak, right, on it. You're good enough at what you do to be able to have an opinion on it. And now you're thinking about, how do I transition from being a developer to being a developer relations engineer? I'm here to tell you this. There is absolutely no downside to it. Absolutely none. But let's start with this. So from getting started to getting traction, right? Exploring the mediums to getting started with DevRel. And then getting traction will now be getting recognition for the work you have already done. Now, at the time when I was at Remita, I think I worked with Angular 8, right? This was like 3 years ago, thereabouts. I worked with Angular 8 at the time. So I was doing very exciting work because everything I was shipping was going directly to users. Immediately, there was obviously the staging and the test and all of that good stuff. But whatever I was writing as the head of that team was going directly to the users. So it was an exciting time. And it placed me at the right place to be able to determine what the developer experience looked like. So I was getting traction, but recognition for the work that was being done and the refurbishing of that work is what was the next stop. Next, please. All right. I mean, it's literally right there. There is no bad outcome when you want to transition from being a developer to being a DevRel. You either get promoted or you get on to get a push to DevRel that you need. Now, let me explain what this is about, right? At the time when I had the whole beautiful experience over at Remita, the work that was being done there it needed a face, right? The developers that were using our APIs needed to be able to say, okay, there's a problem with this. How do we get feedback to the company? And is this feedback that we're giving in, is it reflecting in the product features that are coming out in the next cycle? All of that good stuff was what needed to happen. Now, at the time when, you know what happens? Like, if you've ever worked in a company that has, it's a large company, right? A large company. What happens is sometimes how do I explain this now? You become a cog in the machine. These days, I recognize that in the year 2022, there are a lot of startups, right? And a lot of exciting work is being done by young people and everything. But way back in like 2017, 2018, thereabout, it was, you either joined Andela, right? Or you joined another heavy-duty company, InterSwitch, or a bank or something like that. And so there was never really a face to the work that has been done. When I ended up finding my path into DevRel, how it happened was that I ended up, while raising up conversations about, oh, listen, our developers are using our APIs, but there is something wrong going on here. What happened there was that it bubbled up all the way to the board, right? These days I sit on a board, so I know how far I moved with that conversation. So when it went up to the board, it was magnificent. Now, my own background is in international law and diplomacy, right? I didn't study in tech. I didn't study in computer science in school. So it so happened that the board decided to sit down and say, okay, what is happening with our docs and what is happening with our developer experience? And they said, okay, you know what? How about we give this man that has an artsy background, right, and has been putting in incredible work, how about we put him in charge of a 20-man project, right, to refurbish our entire developer experience? And that's how I went very fast up the ranks. And that's how it happened. Now, let me continue with this, however. So understanding the transition to DevRel is making it easy, right, for your consumers to use your product or service. And the beginning of this, right, was going on to, commenting the code that even I myself was writing, ensuring that the individuals that were using the code, that were writing the backend for my code, ensuring that they were commenting properly, ensuring that they were using their readmes properly. Of course, you'll be surprised at how easily, I mean, from the outside of a tech company, a lot of people think that, oh, no, everything happens, we just put it in, we just write the code, everything, best practices and everything. But if you've written code long enough, you know that it is the battleground, it's the trenches, right? Sometimes you have a hot fix to push Saturday, 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Sometimes 3 a.m. in the morning, your engineering manager is saying, hey, what's up? Listen, we have to get this thing out there. And you have to push it without it being as detailed as you want it to be. But ensuring that good code practices were enforced in the company was my very first task. Because I didn't want to start working from the back, then come to the front and see the problems I left behind, right? All right, let's move to the next slide, please. All right, now, the beginnings of this, however, is very easy. Let me explain how it's very easy. The work that you do as a developer, right, in whatever realm, even if it's something as basic as, doing a wallet auth, right, a wallet authentication, something as basic as that can go into an article, right? Now, so some of the greatest companies, there's a company I know I'm really passionate about, Repel. I don't know how to pronounce the name. It's REPL. I don't know if anyone knows them. Does anyone know REPL? It's a code sandbox company. You know them, right? Exactly. Now, what they do is that there's a lot of magic that happens in the company, right? When to the front end. But what I really, really love is the engineering blog of that company. At the time when Twitter was also a dev-focused company, it was also a very engineering. The blog was fantastic. Now, what you can do as a developer yourself is that whatever solutions you have to a problem, you can get them into an article almost immediately. Yes. Oh, so I did this, I solved this problem by doing this and doing this and doing this. Oh, just get a notation, just write them down somewhere. You get back to them maybe during the weekend or something. Write an article. Today, challenge yourself that for every bit of work I have, that every problem I solve for my company, I will go on to put it in as an article. That's a very basic thing you can do. Of course, you can, if you are a little bit more front-facing like I was, you can be at the forefront of making sure that the documentation is good, is complete. Very important, I promise you. As one of the more mundane parts of my job these days is ensuring that there's a development cycle for docs, right? I presently use a technique I call the documentation engineering technique, right? What I do there is that for every bit of work that does, every feature that comes, I document it. I have my engineers document. Please go ahead, document. I want to see when the entire suite of products is released. Okay, then we have the full documentation and we can flesh it all out, right? A third thing you can do is to, of course, go and speak about your company's work in public. You are bold, you are tenacious. The work that you speak about is what gets traction, is what gets recognition. I'm not speaking about my company's work today because, I think it's time I speak more about myself, But definitely speak about your company's work in public. Now, another thing you can do, however, very, very important, is this. This is very important. I'm a big fan of metrics. What happens here is that when you speak about your company's work, right, you speak about your own engineering practice. Maybe you speak about a couple things that excite you about, about a new framework, right? A new framework that came out. I remember being very much into the whole thing when Svelte, I think, came out. And everyone was really excited. When Dino came out, everyone was really excited. The early testers they did amazing. The ones that were able to very quickly get the equivalent of an Express app over there, they got a bit of traction. That is how you can go about it. If you see the little things that you come across in your learning as a developer, move them into a bit of writing, speak about them, do a small podcast, right? That is how you create some buzz around yourself. Now, what I was saying here was that for every little bit of content that you put out, measure for the amount of people that come back through that piece of content. What this means is this now. So let's say, for example, you speak about a wallet auth. Okay, so wallet auth is done. Then you put a small notation, a small call to action, right, to your company's documentation or to even your company's offerings. And of course, put a slug there to ensure that you can check for the amount of people that go from that document you've written to your company. Just that small amount, even if it's only 2 people, that is you putting in some work and checking for analytics. That is powerful right there. Of course, you can take this analytics to your line manager and all of that good stuff. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right. Now, I'm not going to speak about something that is very important here. That is tapping into the DevRel mindset. So you are a developer, right? Or you are technically minded. Now, what is up next is now how do you not think like a DevRel? Let's move on. Next slide, please. The most important thing you must understand is that development work ends and usability begins. Let me explain what I mean here now. Many developers business, let me explain how it happens sometimes. Me being so close to the top. How it happens is that business or customer relations brings a request. They say, okay, it would be nice if our developers can, or if users can use our product through this offering, right? Or let's say, for example, let me make it a little bit more factual. It would be nice if our users can go on to pay via a transfer, right? And so that comes in through business or customer relations. It comes to product. Head of product says, okay, if we are going to do this, how has it been done before? Okay, we break it into this is how we did, this is how it happens. They create a user story, right? That entire flow for how we integrate into the existing product goes to your product manager. Now, your product manager at that point in time breaks it into stories, right? And then he carries those stories and says, okay, everybody, we are going to set up a sprint. Everybody sets up sprints, and then it comes to the developers, right? It comes to your tech lead, for example. And from your tech lead now comes and breaks it for everyone that is in that team. That is how it usually happens. Now, what happens there is that many developers do not go on to now look back all the way back up the chain. They stay from that point. They say, okay, it's a transfer. Okay, we just need to be able to click. When the user has done the transfer, they click on, yes, I have done the transfer. That's all they know. They don't know what the entire import, how it enters into the usability cycle of the entire product. And that is something that will happen at the beginning of your career, naturally. But if you really want to advance, you need to look at how it fits into the business needs. And that is also another way for you to enter into a DevRel mindset. Let's go forward, please. Next slide. Okay, good. Stop here. All right. So tapping into DevRel mindset means you must be curious about what happens when your product leaves your hands and goes into the hands of the developers using it, right? Now, for the sake of someone that is, that is more entrepreneurial minded, perhaps, it's interesting for them to see how they will deal with the product when it enters into the hands of users. But for you, you are interested in how it gets into the hands of developers. When they consume the API, what does it look like? How does it feel to them? Does it feel well documented? Does it feel like it's something that developers are excited to use? Is there supporting documentation? Is there a narrative around the product? Are there resources that will allow the developer to use the product outside of this small world that has been created by themselves? Is there an ambassador writing program that is written by developers themselves, but not your company's developers, outside of the company? You understand? There's a lot going on there. All right, let's move forward, please. All right. The whole process of seeing how that happens is amazing. It's amazing. But there's, of course, the more structured mindset of how to enter into a DevRel, state of mind, which is getting a mentor, reading books, going for workshops, things like this. This is, of course, very surface level, right? I cannot begin to dive into the deeper sides of things. But there is a more structured effort to it. And, hey, if you can find a mentor, definitely stick with one. Next slide. All right. But the core of it is really tapping into understanding how the product has moved from you to the developers, right? Now, what happened in my own time at least was that, so I built out by the way, after I moved away from building the product, the front end of that product, what I ended up doing was now building the entire documentation website. At the time, I don't know if Docusaurus was a thing. Docusaurus, README, there are a lot of documentation engines these days, right? I don't know if that was a thing. But I had to build the entire thing in Angular 8 and all of that good stuff. And essentially, when we finished building that entire project with a team of like 20 people, right? From product managers, engineers, to business people, to developers, and all of that good stuff. What I now had to do, of course, to complete the entire circle was to set up a forum for the products, right? I set up a small Slack interface. And what Slack was doing there was just, okay, now listen, we've taken these docs, we've taken our product, we put it into your hands. What do you think about it? You are consuming our APIs. What does this mean for you? Are we doing what the documentation says? The narrative around our company, is it fulfilling what you expect it to do? All of that good stuff, right? Bringing that feedback, then what I did was now go on to now complete the circle 360, right? What I did then was not to say, okay, for every bit of this feedback that was coming back, take the feedback and then take it to product. And listen, product, this is what your people are saying, The people that employ us, because really, there's no business that exists outside of the users, right? For the people that employ us, this is what they are saying, this is what they want to see. What are they saying? What are you going to do? And that goes on to feed what the development cycle looks like again. So it's an entire cycle from the beginning. Product goes out, is documented, it goes into the hands of the users. Users bring feedback. The feedback comes back, goes into product again. It's an entire circle. Next slide, please. All right. So, boom, magic. You are now a DevRel. What next? But not actually magic, because in real fact, if there's one thing I want you to leave here with today, or leave this talk with today, I want you to leave with an understanding that you yourself, you are going to do what is called personal DevRel. So for the work that you do, right, for the work that you do, listen, if you are doing MPX, run, whatever, yeah, cool. For the work that you do there, for your own work, that tiny bit of work that you do, you are doing DevRel for it. If that's what I want you to leave here with, that's what I want you to be. Now, so you are DevRel, what next? Next slide, please. All right. Okay, so now finding balance between the core functionality work and helping other devs find success, right? Um, of course, like I said before, in my career path, I started out with writing documentation for the company, and then going on to now ensure that that is in sync, right? Then cultivate the ability to reach into a product and evaluate it top to bottom to see what the developer relations, see what the developer journey looks like, right? Now, are there resources that allow you to use the product outside of the core docs? What are these resources looking like? Are they, in fact, to be frank, it's actually a measure of how much, how do I explain it now? It's a measure of how loved your product is for people to take out time on their own to actually decide to write about it. Apologies for that. All right. So taking all of these amazing narratives around your company and helping them to create a narrative is essentially what you need to do, right? Next slide. All right. So listen, that was about being a beginner. Now you are not the liaison, right? Understanding how to now effectively inform product decisions is such a core part now, right? So you are a beginner, you've done that, you've scaled up your career a little bit. How to insert yourself into product, insert yourself into engineering, and do a bit of marketing at while you are doing it too. In fact, it's literally the core of what happens there, right? So there's a bit of work that needs to be done here, right? If I had a bit more time, I would actually explain what this is about, right? Is the AAARRP framework. Engineering, could you skip forward? Just skip. You. Now, this is important because all the part I skipped, I'm going to make sure to leave them as resources just after, right? Now, the stage of where your company is at is very important. Now, if your company is an early stage company, right, then you definitely want to get more awareness around what you do. So what you want to do is do more things around the realm of, putting out blog posts, doing articles, right? Setting up hackathons around your company's offerings, going on to have the work properly documented, all of that good stuff, right? If you are at the stage of, if you are a little bit more mid-stage, then you want to create more retention, right? Retention, of course, means that you are going on to, look at what scaling your company's offerings look like, stepping into the realm of, entrenching yourself into the product itself. How can we scale it? So we have 100 customers. How is it working? But now we have 1,000 customers. How is it working? Is the developer experience still good? Oh, now we have 1 million. Oh, hallelujah. Right? We have 1 million. And so how do we now go on to make that even better for developers? All of that stuff is what happens, right? All right, let's move forward, please. Your career trajectory is very important, right? So you decided that, oh, yes, I want to try out being a dev role. And of course you're looking for who doesn't like an easier way to enter into affairs? In my own case, it was something of a shoehorn. I just literally just slid inside. But for most people, if you are one that you can speak to audiences like this, then I definitely will always ask that you try with community. Community is an amazing place. Community is an amazing thing to be involved in, really, right? If you are someone that your strength lies in writing, I have an amazing assistant like that. Her strength is in writing. Then definitely get some content pieces out there. You're already technical. Might as well just go on to speak about it. Oh, and if your work is more around the realm of communicating value of your company to an external organization, definitely try things like documentation, right? But the fastest thing you can do to grow yourself as a developer relations engineer is definitely trying something around the realm of, doing things that you are not strong at, right? So, the reason why I got to this point in my career was because I tried one thing. Okay, no, I'm going to say the truth now, right? This is the first time I'm speaking to a Nigerian audience, right? This is literally the first time. So this is me trying something that I have not done before. I almost always speak to developer relations engineers outside of the country. And so identifying the gaps in your skill set, right? And helping yourself be good at those spaces is what you can actually do to be as fast, you can go as fast as you can. And of course, my fave, be your own personal dev role. Root for yourself. Definitely always good for yourself. Next slide, please. All right. So these are some resources. Listen, the AAARRP framework is somewhere around within these slides, right? I think it should be on the It should be on the second, all right? It should be on the second. But essentially, what you want to do here is that please go through this, take a picture of this, and go through this, right? This is an amazing resource, by the way, right? Whatever you do, make sure that for your own self, you are rooting for yourself first, right? Because I guess it's really a case of is what is within that comes outside. If you are speaking enough about your work, then you are definitely going to be able to speak about your company's work. Thank you so much for having me, guys.